welcome Celeste to the podcast. I would love to know, are you well actually?
Am I well actually? I'm pretty well. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean it could mean anything.
Do you know, I feel like wellness is it's not like you said it. I never heard this statement before. And it's funny, you said the statement to me, and ever since you said it, I hear it all the time because you were feeling quite up and down with your pregnancy. Sometimes you had energy, sometimes you were feeling a little bit weary. And I said to you, "Oh, how's today, Elle?" And you said, "Yeah, it's like it slipped back a bit." And I was like, "Oh no." And you went, "Yep, it's not linear." And I suppose that is probably the best way to describe wellness, is because it's really a work in progress. And I'll be perfectly honest with your listeners. I mean, when I'm stressed, I don't sleep. And I have got that, and maybe I picked it up from my mum because like hyper doers, always trying to like do, and if something's not going well, we like mentally obsess about it, which wakes us up. And I definitely have that in me, but recently a lot better. And I don't know if it's worth me sharing what I've been doing to help this.
No, do please, we love that.
So, and it's basically just going back to the principles that yoga teaches us about, the fluctuations of the mind and how we need to chill those out. And what I've been doing is in the nighttime, I hear the mental dialogue coming.
Yeah.
Da 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 da. Oh, I haven't done this. And I feel I'm so in tune with my body. I can actually feel the energy rising of like, I should get up and do stuff to get done with, basically cross things off a to-do list. And then now what I've been doing the last few weeks, but of course it's working because I'm not stressed, is I'm like, instead of listening to that dialogue that's in your head, focus instead on what you can feel, the sounds that you can actually physically hear. So there is a road and sometimes there's an occasional car passing. I try and listen out for it. Or if there's some birds, because they start really early, the birds. Yeah. I try and listen out for the sounds, and I try and really focus on the rhythm of my breathing and all of those sensory inputs quietens down the mental dialogue. And I feel like that switch, then before I know it, I'm fast asleep again. And I'm like, oh, this is a good one. So hopefully it helps someone out there. I'll share what my brother does. It's so cute because I told him about this. We were in Ibiza together. And I was telling him, I'm really trouble sleeping. I'm awake all the time.
Yeah.
And his strategy is he has a little painter decorator in his head. And every time the thoughts come, his little dude is painting. And then another thought comes, little man is painting over it. And he just... I'm like, wow, your little dude is working hard. He's like, yes, he does, but I'm sleeping real good.
That's great. I love that. So just a way to sort of like lay over the mind a little bit. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I love
And
and what's really good, sorry to interrupt you there, your what you say about listening out for cars and things. Some people find noises in the night really irritating, but actually if you kind of focus on something outside of your brain, which might be quite busy, that's actually kind of a good way to look at it. You can actually use that as a little advantage.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, I mean, my partner, he has misophonia. So like any little sound really annoys him. But I feel like it's the focusing on the annoyingness. Like, oh, I can hear myself being annoyed and I'm focusing on that mental dialogue. And I think it's all about understanding that it's this mental dialogue that we need to step away from. And it's very difficult. Hey, if any of you guys are out there listening thinking, yeah, I've tried this and it's not worked, trust that you are not alone. There's so many people that really struggle. And I'll be perfectly transparent. When I am very stressed, the mental dialogue is far more powerful than my ability to switch to a focused sensation.
Yeah. As you say, it ebbs and flows, go through phases, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I had that like just myself last night. A to-do list started whirring away at about 2 a.m. And it was, I actually I think I put on like a little yoga nidra that I found on Spotify, which
So
kind of helped.
nice. Yoga Nidra is very good. Yeah, it really does help to, it just takes your mind out of the chatter and makes you focus on something physical. And Yoga Nidra like really makes you take your time with that because it's like one finger at a time.
Yeah.
Literally every body part.
One hair on your head. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And have you, how has your kind of attitude to being well changed over the years, would you say, Celeste?
I mean, I always grew up with a mum who was really into health. I mean, our definition of health has, of course, progressed very far over the years. Like, although she was always very in, I grew up with a very sick father, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, really, really unwell. And so I guess my mum was always trying to find the next best thing that would help him. And so we grew up in that. But I think education around wellness, of course, has improved a lot over the years. And so we've just been on that journey with the education that's come through the
Mm.
woodwork. So understanding, and guys, look, this is a hot topic out there. The whole thing with like eating too much sugar. Look, a lot of people are like, sugar's not the enemy, and I agree with that. But for me personally, what I have found is that when I do eat a lot of sugar, I crave it all the time and I overindulge in it. And a lot of people also will then say, look, you can actually have dessert every day if you're not eating carbohydrates like potatoes and rice. But I just love potatoes and rice. I don't want to eat just proteins and vegetables. I'm really sorry. Like for me, like a good roasty is like the best thing ever. And I would eat the roasty because of that salty goodness over the chocolate dessert. Like for me, that's actually the tasty part of dinner.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. I find, and not just physically, but I find if I'm eating too much sugar, it really impacts my mental health as well,
Big
and my
time.
sleep and all of that. And yeah, and it's hard. Oh, I find it really hard to moderate. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, for me, sugar's a big one. And, we grew up just in South Africa, which has unfortunately really been Americanized a lot with lots of fast food. And that's kind of the norm, lots of processed food. People are very overweight. Not a lot of
Mm,
people will walk anywhere. They'll drive, obviously, because of safety reasons.
yeah.
And so we were just in that culture. So moving to England, I think, was a really powerful shift because you have to walk a lot. My little legs had never walked that many steps ever in its life. And then we started realizing the impact sugar had. And so I actually, I always struggled with my skin my whole life.
Mm,
I'd love to tell you guys a little bit about that journey. But just
mm,
before I do, one of the things everyone's always like, oh, your diet, you're eating dairy or da da da. I actually cut out sugar for 6 months, which was very, very hard for me because I love a treat just like anyone. But
mhm.
I did it and it changed my palate. And then now I have a much more healthy relationship with sugar. Like I used to not being able to walk past a pastry shop
Yeah.
without going, I need one now. And now I'm like, oh, these pastries. I'm like, oh, they don't look very good quality. So it's funny how
Mm,
I'm like, oh no, they don't look like the crispy, really good ones. Or,
mm,
actually, I've just eaten lunch. I'm quite full. So it's like your relationship with food changes once you actually go cold turkey off of something. I'm
mm.
not saying this is right for everyone, but for me, particularly helped because I was just really like my cravings were level 10.
Yeah, no, I relate to that a lot. Yeah, no, that's a great, that's really, that's, it's so true. It's so true. And you've been a yoga teacher and a movement teacher for many, many years. How did you discover that?
So I danced when I was little, and then I really wanted to dance professionally, and so we moved to England, and I just realized the standard here was very, very high, and I was probably not going to get work, and I decided to train. Well, I thought I was going into an aerobics instructor's course, but it was actually a fitness instructor's course where you learn how to PT people in a gym. So I was like, oh, this is like, I'd actually turned to someone halfway through the day and said, this is not aerobics, is it? They were like, no, this is weightlifting. But actually, that was so cool. I really, in the end, I just got so much from that course. I started working in a gym just for extra money because I was very broke after traveling. And I discovered yoga there. I discovered yoga in the gym and I just absolutely fell in love with it. Worked hard to, well, I went through physio. I went to I went traveling again, then decided to come back and I went through physio school. And
Mm,
after that, I actually got my yoga teacher training.
yeah.
Sorry, I got my yoga teacher training on traveling, went to physio school. And then after I graduated physio school, gosh, the timeline, it's very early in the morning here, guys. I then ended up teaching yoga, but with this like extra anatomy knowledge. And that's basically the journey.
That's a lot. And you know what's so amazing about that, Celeste, is a lot of those courses individually, like the training to be a PT, the training to be a physio, the training to be a yoga teacher, would miss parts, but those together is just so incredible. You must have been
I still
brimming.
missed a lot of parts. Hey, Al, I want to say like I stepped off the boat and I knew what I was talking about, but there was a lot of guessing going on. And mostly because, guys, listen, if you are, if you're a graduate physio, you know nothing. You know, like all the names of the bones and all the names of the muscles and their attachment points, but really how the system works as a whole, that took me a good 20 years. And I'm still not there. Like now that I'm specializing in neuroscience, you have to learn about the whole system. So wow, now my knowledge from back then, it's a whole different ball game. But when you step 3 years out of university as a physio school, I mean, yeah, it's ridiculously low, your knowledge levels.
I think a lot of yoga teachers probably feel like that as well when they leave, just because there's so much to learn from actually being on the job and actually doing the thing.
Absolutely. It's such a hard job. I don't think people appreciate just how hard it is to step into a room full of people, create an experience that's memorable so people actually come back so you have a sustainable business,
Mm.
and at the same time deliver value that's individualized to each unique nervous system's requirements. Like this is really, really challenging. And
Mm.
so all of you yoga teachers out there, my goodness, you're doing an amazing job.
Mm.
Just trust that every time you teach a class that's maybe not as good as the class before, like you've really tried and that's all you can do.
Mm. Yeah, and sometimes you just have those off days. You do your best.
Like weekly, weekly off days.
Yeah, well, me too. And you must, I mean, you must then bring in so much the teacher trainings you run. You have one coming up, right? Can you
Yeah,
tell
I've
us?
got a teacher training coming up with Hannah Barrett in January.
Mm.
And now, of course, like because I'm specializing in neuroscience, a lot of that has been woven in. And there's obviously a
Mm.
lot of it, the basic anatomy, which I think is really important foundation, but more trying to like not get people fixated about knowing every muscle and every bone, but actually overriding that, really understand how the system works as a whole and looking for signs in people, understanding that there are some basic things you can look for to understand maybe how you're not supporting their nervous system in the best way. And
Mm.
things like threat are very common. So you'll maybe have some teachers that are like, if you're not like gritting your teeth in absolute pain, this is not so much yoga, but a lot of people are like, if you're not like to get that weight up or get that last pull up, you know, that's, you're not going to get the gains. But actually you're building a threat response. And that's why a lot of people injure. It's not because they've damaged any of their tissues, but because their nervous system is ready
Mm.
for threat. You know, it's
Yes.
always looking for the next threat. And you're like, oh, this is threatening. So actually, this is not good for me. So I know what I'll do. This is the brain's dialogue. I'll give my human pain so they won't do this anymore. And then that way they'll be safe. Because all it cares about is your safety. It doesn't really care about if you're thriving or just surviving. It doesn't care. It
Yeah.
just wants to make sure you're safe. So like looking out for signs of threat is really important.
So that's why even when someone comes, because maybe especially people who live in London and we're in a quite fight flight state anyway, is that why would you say so many people come to a yoga class? And you know, it can be quite a slow flow. It might not even be that demanding physically, but you'll see people seize up even when they have to hold a pose or hold their breath. You see that response in their nervous system. Is that why? Because their nervous system's perceiving a threat that isn't really there?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, yes, and that's happening all the time for everyone.
Mm.
All nervous systems are perceiving threats that aren't there. So, our job, like for me as a physio, what I would do is let's say someone comes to me with really, really bad back pain.
Mm.
Nice, easy example. You know, once I've assessed their back and I've made sure that actually the structures there are sound, now I realize that their body is, their brain utilizes pain as an output. Pain is not an input. Pain is an output to keep you
Mm.
safe. And so back pain's a really powerful one because if your back hurts, you're going to be laying down in bed. You're safe in bed. You're not going to be lifting heavy things. That makes you safer. You're not going to be moving as much. So all of these behavior change strategies are utilized by the brain to help keep you safe. So what my job would be as a physio is not necessarily to strengthen their back muscles or even muscles like their glutes, which support their back. Maybe we'll do a bit of that, but my job would be to reduce their overall threat. Now, that might mean looking at how well their eyes move. That might mean looking at their vestibular system, their inner ear, checking that that's functioning well. That might mean assessing their motor cortex, making sure there's no fuzzy parts of the map, making sure those maps are crisp and actually working well. Assessing a really important part of your brain called the cerebellum, and making sure that the cerebellum, which basically does almost everything, including processing things like gravity, making sure that the cerebellum is actually well functioning, taking in information, because its job is to simplify. So it takes in everything, all of your environment, and then it goes, that's not needed, that's not needed, that's not needed. So you can imagine if that's not working well, that's really threatening for your system. So we need to make sure we upregulate that part of the brain. And now look, there's lots of others that I could mention, but just in a brief nutshell, my job would be to reduce overall threat. And what we then see is the brain's like, I'm safe. I don't need to use back pain as a modality anymore. You're good. No more
That's
pain.
amazing.
It
That
is
is
amazing.
so some of us are going in at a level of I need to fix my back when actually sounds a bit extreme, but I need to fix my brain. Would that be correct?
Every single time.
Wow.
Yeah, every single time. And what the reason we know this, I'll share a really amazing, this study is just the best. So they took a huge sample size. I mean, about 3,600 people. I'm not getting the number exact, but it was massive. It was around the 3,000 mark, over 3,000 mark. And they made sure that every single person in the cohort had zero pain.
Hmm.
And they took a massive age range from 20s all the way through to the 80s. And they assessed each person's spine to a very, very high level. And they tried to look for degenerative changes. And they found that in the 20s, the percentage of degenerative changes in the back were very low. But as each age group increased, the degenerative changes went up. So there were more and more people in each age group that had these issues, from a herniated disc to facet joint syndrome to spondylolisthesis. I always struggle to say that one.
It's a long one.
Yeah, that's a tongue tied this early. Spinal fusion, all the most horrendous back problems that you can imagine were found in every single age group. But remember what I said, the cohort had no pain. Not a single person in this huge group had pain. But they found that almost every single age group had significant back issues.
Hmm.
And so what this basically taught us is that tissue damage doesn't equal pain, and pain doesn't equal tissue damage. That there are a lot of people living with some really nasty things going on inside them, but they're living pain-free. And that degenerative changes in your back is normal. It's okay. If you have got something going on, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to live in pain. And this is where the conversation and the debate around whether or not clinicians should be showing and telling their patient about scans that they've had. Oh, look at the scan. Look at this terrible big bulge coming out in your back. Oh, this is the reason you've got your pain. When we look at statistics, people actually increase their pain levels by around 17% when we show them scans of their body. But scans are not always very accurate. Sometimes, if we take the same person, we scan them now, and in 10 minutes, we scan them again, it'll be a very different picture that we're looking at in those scans, because the body is a moving entity. It's not fixed. So maybe you're leaning over in the one moment that the scan goes and there's a little bulge, and then the next moment you're perfectly neutral and there's no bulge. And then we look at the scan and we make these rapid judgments about someone's body, and it massively influences how that person moves forward in life.
Because they perceive
And
a threat from that.
exactly, they perceive a threat from it. And so I'm not sure if this is common practice now, but I did have a client who had a really bad shoulder, and the clinician didn't show him the scan. He sent him a typed up thing of what he could see. However, the clinician did, this is such a funny story, want to give him surgery. He couldn't, however, make the surgery appointment because he was on his way on holiday to South Africa. So I contacted him. How's your holiday going? How's your shoulder? Because he's a surfer, and his shoulder was a real problem for his surfing, and he went to a surf location.
Yeah.
How's your shoulder? No pain. zero pain. I
Mm.
was like, and he was really suffering before. I was like, oh, that's funny. Of course, reduced threat on holiday, no responsibilities. He's in a warm country. He's totally happy there. He's surrounded by family at that location. No pain. As soon as he came back home, he lives in Scotland, he had his issues come back.
Mm.
So just that's like a little story just to illustrate. And I'm sure there's lots of you guys who've maybe gone on holiday and the little issues that you faced suddenly disappeared. And then you came back and you're like, huh, it's back. Like, oh, this is so weird.
No, that's so interesting, and it makes so much sense because, the body can't really heal itself anyway when you're in fight flight. So, it
Yeah.
figures that it's gonna, whatever's brewing is gonna. So what would you, I mean, how did you get into this stuff, Celeste, through any sustaining any injuries of your own, or was it just something that really interested you? Kind of the
It's,
neuroscience
I
end.
mean, both. Hey, listen, I've always been very interested in this stuff. Since I was in uni, I found the neuro component fascinating. However, I will say that my little hypermobile body, I've been through the mill. My goodness, I've gone through all sorts of little injuries myself. And it's funny well, they actually did, I'll share another study. They took people with severe back pain and they had three different interventions. They gave the one group pain education, like I'm discussing now. Pain is an output, it's based off of how safe you feel. It's not a derogatory pain is in your head. Pain is very real, but it is from the brain. It's a creation of the brain. So that this is the one cohort. The second cohort, they gave some really strong drugs, corticosteroids, analgesics. And the third group, they gave regular physio.
Mm.
And sad, but regular physio performed the worst of all the groups. But education won by a mile. And
Mm.
they'd repeated the study again and again. And they found that almost every time, education won. Education far outperformed pain medication.
Yes.
And so what this does is it changes our relationship with pain, not in the sense that, oh, I'm going to positive mentally talk myself out of this pain. That's not it. It's more like, oh, brain, like you don't feel safe. Let me look at my lifestyle and my body holistically and figure out why is it that my brain doesn't feel safe? Oh, I just went through a divorce.
Mm.
Oh, I'm due to give birth and maybe there's anxiety around that.
Mm.
I hate my job. You know that job satisfaction is actually the highest indicator of back pain. And another quick one for your listeners, I think you'd find interesting, is construction workers had the lowest level of things like back pain,
Mm.
and people in the wellness industry, the highest.
Wow. We're doing something wrong.
How funny is that?
That is so interesting because I wonder if it's because we like in some of us in the wellness world overthink things. Whereas I don't know, I mean, I'm massively generalizing here, but I feel like when you're in construction work, you're doing a job. It's a means to an end, and they're outside. It's usually sunny. They always sound like they're having a great time on
Yeah,
the
it's low
job.
threat. Remember, dealing with people is hard,
Yeah.
and I think making a sustainable business in the wellness industry is harder than it looks on the outside.
Yeah.
And so I think it's people's threat levels are just so high in the wellness industry, and that is why their brain chooses pain as an output to help change their behavior. You always need to think along those lines. And yes, overthinking can play into that, but it's one piece of a big puzzle. So remember that when looking at when looking at the body and the brain, it's simultaneously empowering and frustrating to view it through this lens of threat, because empowering annoying because now there's so many variables to consider and it's overwhelming,
Yes.
but really empowering because now you're looking at the body through a holistic lens. And traditionally through allopathic medicine, we have massively put our blinkers on and we have viewed the body through a reductionist mechanism. And physiotherapy is the same. My elbow hurts, let me look at your elbow. Oh, maybe we'll go as far as wrist and shoulder, but actually the problem could be your left ankle.
Yeah.
Or maybe the problem is the fact that your inner ear is wonky. So when you're in plank, you can't sense where to put your elbow properly. Or
Yeah.
maybe the fact that when you're in a plank position, your eyes are going into convergence because you're looking at an object fairly close to you, and your brain doesn't like that. It's threatening. Can you see how broad this is? It's
Totally.
massive. So, yes, frustrating, but also empowering.
Yeah. I totally relate to that because I recently studied in a naturopathic course at CNM, and that's all about looking at the whole system all the time, more from like a kind of body systems view than necessarily anatomy and movement in the brain, but still. So I can really relate to that a lot. Things that one, as you say, a symptom might seem so unrelated to what's actually causing it.
Absolutely. I
It's
mean,
all
look at the job satisfaction, like the highest indicator of back pain is job satisfaction. Like, that's wild.
so fascinating, so interesting. And Celeste, can I ask you, do you have any kind of daily or regular non-negotiables that you do, maybe for this kind of thing? I know you love the vestibular drills, which I really enjoy when I've done your class. Or maybe it's not that, maybe it's something completely different. I'd love to know.
So, I've just moved house and I was sick. So, my non negotiables went out the window, if I'm really honest with
Yeah,
you.
understandable, happens.
And I think it's important for me to say that because I think sometimes you see people, they're on podcasts like this and they've got this like shiny exterior and they're like, oh, I do this thing every day. And to be honest with you, I do have little ones that I enjoy doing. And I love to do my vision drills and my vestibular drills first thing in the morning. And I love to go for a half an hour walk every morning. But it's okay if you can't do your non negotiables as well. I think like, it's just one of those things. Like, for example, there are people who will not eat if the food is not very healthy. I think it's called what's it called? Aphorexia?
Orthorexia,
Orthorexia.
big one.
And it's a big one. Now, think about the underlying intention is so pure, like they always want to eat healthy food. But the end result is actually a lack of health because they're not eating enough.
Mm.
And so in the same, let's flip that now into this thing of, having things to do. Sometimes you can create so much stress because you're putting so many things into your day because you've got these things that you have to do, otherwise you don't feel normal. And so for me, yes, I've got these things that I'd love to do. I'd love to exercise every day, go for a walk and do my drills, my brain drills. But sometimes that adds in a lot of stuff into a day. And I'm a child-free human who has my own business. So having non-negotiables is a lot easier than for someone who's working 8 till 6 in front of a screen. They've got to commute into work. They have a family and they don't necessarily have the residual income to have a cleaner, or they've got to cook all their meals and they're trying their best. Like, guys, just remember you're always doing your best, I think. And if your day is very full and you can't have a non-negotiable, then that's okay. However, I'll just kind of throw in a little curveball. For our bodies to function well, we do need to move. We do need to have some movement. We need some fresh air. We need natural light. So where possible, I think a really cool strategy is called chunking. I didn't invent this, but it's basically where you try and group things up. So for example, if you know you need to spend some time with your children at the end of the day, and it's a possibility, try and go outside. So you're getting a bit of physical movement in, you're outside in natural light, and you're playing with them. So that's a chunk, right? If you know that they have to do their homework and you have to cook a healthy meal, could you set them up near you in the kitchen so that while you're chopping, you're also looking over them with their homework and you're giving them that attention that they deserve, but at the same time you're making something nutritious to eat? So again, a chunk. Could you reach out to your community and see if maybe there's a group of you that could create a carpool so that a few of you are taking the kids to school? So I guess I'm just throwing these strategies out and they might not be appropriate for everyone, but is there a way to weave some wellness into your lifestyle without it making this big thing that you have to throw out your job?
Yeah, no,
Like, live as a monk.
no, it's so true. It's about being able to make it work and do your best, I guess. That's
Exactly.
great. My little brain is just whirring over because I'm about to enter a phase of my life where a lot of my big, grand, like self-care things are gonna go. So I'm going to be chunking hard, basically. So yeah, just thinking of all the ways I can chunk. I'll let you know how it goes. Um, that's great advice though. And I think it's just, yeah, as you say, it's just doing your best, isn't it? It doesn't always have to look. I think maybe with things with social media, we can make it look like it's very perfect and it's we wake up every morning, we have our beautiful
Hmm.
matcha and we meditate for an hour and we, it's not even people, as you say, even people who got that extra time and that kind of thing, it's not a reality for a lot of people.
No ways. And I think, I really take inspiration from the people who do all those like beautiful things and they, make it look so beautiful on social media and like good on them, like really amazing. They do actually inspire us in a way. So,
Oh,
if you guys are out there doing that, this is absolutely not a criticism.
no,
But
no.
if you are looking at those things and you're thinking, how do people live this life? And you may be building this side of envy inside you, or maybe resentment, and that's making you not appreciate the life you have. That's a real problem. Like I'll be the first to say I unfollow a lot of people on social media, not because they are bad or that I don't like their content or that I think that they aren't worthy of having another amazing follower like who adores them. But I just have to look after my mental health. And when I'm like, do you know what? This is not serving me. Like I'm looking at this person thinking, oh, I'm not doing XYZ. That needs to go. That's the first thing out the window.
True, it's true. It's because it's about what it, as you say, they'll just carry on doing what they're doing. It's about what it brings up in you, isn't it?
Totally.
Making you
And I want them to succeed and do well. And at the same time, I want myself to feel like I can wake up in the morning and be content with my life, however simple that life is. What have I got that I can be grateful for? And if something is taking that gratitude out of me, it's out the window.
yeah. And that kind of that's quite a good way, I suppose, to segue. I always ask everyone that I have on if there's anything out there in the sort of wider wellness world. Usually, maybe you might see it on social media or just in some other type of media that is touted as a well-being practice that you suspect might actually cause more harm than good.
Oh, I'm sure there is some. Memory recall low. um, Wellness things. Oh, I mean, it goes back to what I said earlier, where this is one, I think, like, there was a little post flying around, like, if you're not gritting your teeth and scrunching your face up into a mess and going, rah, with every rep, that rep is not worthy. Like, you're not going heavy enough, you're not going hard enough, go home.
Mm.
Go hard or go home, basically. Just based off of what I understand at this stage in my learning, I would say that potentially for a lot of people, that's not the right way. If perhaps you're a professional athlete, you need to be used to pushing into threat, you need to get your system to modulate around threat, maybe that's a great strategy. But for most people, they're dealing with chronic pain of some sort and they want to make sure that their body gets better. That is not the right strategy for you.
Right.
You need to be allowing yourself to yeah, breathe. Oh, there's all these social media posts that are like, get rid of this roll by doing these exercises. You can't spot reduce fat, guys. Allow your body to be natural.
Yes.
I think also there is a lot of editing going on social media, which kills me. I mean, yeah, a lot of like making it look a little different in proportions than what it actually is. The posing, I don't know. Yeah, it's a bit cringy, guys. Can we stop it?
And it's misleading for the people who are following that and thinking, oh, yeah, I can look like that if I do this.
Yeah, big time. And I think actually these people have had surgery and injectables,
Yep.
So I think transparency is something that we need to bring probably into the social media realm. And maybe there needs to be something like someone just saying, maybe just being really honest and going like, I have had this X surgery and this X injectables, just to be fully transparent. Maybe that should be like a rule. And then if
Think,
you break the rules, you're out.
I think at one point, I might be wrong here, but I feel like Instagram tried to introduce something where they flagged photos as being edited, heavily edited. I don't think it went down that
Wow.
well. Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I suppose 99% of the content creators out there were. Yeah, not really
When you were
allowed.
saying about the transparency thing, do you know there's the woman who created, do you know about the Whole 30? That kind of diet, but sort of it's like an elimination protocol. It's kind of, some people love it, some people think it's a bit restrictive, but she's quite funny. The woman who runs it, she's called Melissa Urban, and she did a post and she just spoke to camera, and she said what did she say? She was like, everyone's been complimenting my skin. And she's like, I've had a ton of filler put in my face.
Oh, bless her for
And she
saying
was
that.
like, it's not my diet. It's not the creams and everything. It's the filler. And I was like, yes.
Thank
And she's
you.
absolutely not the only one, you
And
know?
you know what? I actually have no judgment against someone who has put fillers in. Like, if you look good and you've done it well, girl, who's your person? You know,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah, right.
I mean, like, let's just like it's like putting makeup on. I wear makeup every day. How can I judge someone for doing like where's the line, you know?
Mm,
So it's all good, guys. If you're doing that, amazing. But I think on social media, people think that these guys, like, they're like, oh, I'm so natural, you know? And
mm,
it's like, well, you're not really, you know? And,
mm.
you know, all, and that's okay. It's okay not to be fully natural. We live in a life where there's so much pressure to look a certain way. And so sometimes people do go to some extra lengths to do what
Mm,
they've done. I'm wearing makeup and mascara and foundation like that. Those are the things I'm doing every day to make myself look like I've got a filter walking down the street.
mm.
So yeah, just I think maybe just a little bit more transparency, and probably what we'll find is people are going to breathe a sigh of relief. They're not going to judge you for it.
And it's endearing, and like,
Yeah,
it's just, it allows for people to be who they want to be as well, and do what they want to do. You know, it's your
yeah,
face, your body.
definitely. And I think if you are judging someone for that, if you are getting on, you know, keyboard warrior mode and you're saying mean things to people, if
Mm,
they are coming out with that kind of thing, I think that's really nasty. I think, you know,
yeah,
keep it safe and supportive.
totally. And so something I always like to ask as well, Celeste, and it doesn't have to be a typically wellnessy thing. Is there anything you do that just brings you a lot of joy, a lot of sense of like a feeling of being well, that maybe isn't anything to do with exercise or fitness or nutrition or anything like that, that you'd love to share with the listeners?
I just love sleeping. I just really enjoy sleeping. By 8:30, I'm getting quite tired. I know I'm a proper granny and I'm just gonna own it. I like get really tired around 8:30. I start getting ready for bed. I'm in bed by 9.
Me
I'm
too.
usually asleep by 9:30. And I love that. And I like to sleep a long time every day. And
Yeah.
I get grumpy if I don't do that.
I think that's so
And
yeah. People almost like I feel like people almost proud of themselves when they haven't slept a lot. They like brag about how little sleep they get.
some people do,
I'm the
yeah.
opposite. I'm like,
And
oh
also
my.
people really judge people going to bed early. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm tired. Like, you're tired and you're just sat there watching TV. Like, surely my strategy is better.
I'm actually sleeping.
Yeah, I'm actually listening to my body's signals of
Yeah.
needing to rest, which I think is really cool.
Me too, me too. I'm definitely team granny with you. So
Good. Yay. More team grannies. And like, you know, people are like, I'm like well known for, you know, it gets to 8:30 and I'm in a group of people drinking alcohol and I start making myself a herbal tea. And
yeah,
like, my chamomile comes out.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
People are
Ah,
like, oh my
right.
God, Celeste.
Quietly slipping away.
Yeah, literally. I'm like, oh, look at the time you are.
That's so great. Celeste, where can we find you? What, I know you've got a teacher training starting in January with Hannah Barrett. You also have an
Yeah.
amazing app, Anatomy.
Yeah, thanks. Also, well, first of all, if you just Google Celeste Yoga or Celeste Physio, and you don't put an E at the end of my name because my mum
Oh yeah.
doesn't like silent vowels. I really wanted to change my name for a long time because of her ridiculous spelling. But then I was like, you know what? I am Googleable. Googleable.
Googleable.
I'm Googleable. So whatever. We're going to keep it without the E. But yeah, if you look up Celeste finishing at the T with yoga or physio afterwards, you'll get a bunch of links, and I'm sure somewhere there you'll find me.
Yeah.
But celestepereira.com is my website, and you can find out all things about me and Celeste Pereira Physio on Instagram. I have got an app called Anatomove, and if you have struggling with things like, and you can't get to physio, like a herniated disc or maybe some knee pain, there's some really good content in there that could help.
Mm.
Um, and Yes, I've got my teacher training with Hannah as well coming up. Yeah, which I'm really excited to share with
Amazing.
everyone. So yeah, those are the main things.
Amazing. And you have your own wonderful podcast as well, of course.
I do love at first science, and wow, the amazing people that I've had on that podcast has,
Yeah.
I say I always run the podcast more for me than for anyone, because
Yeah.
running a podcast these days is challenging, as you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's just all about having these conversations. I get so much from them. And thank you so much for this conversation. It's been a joy talking to you.
Yes, me too. I'll pop all the links to everything in the show notes so everyone can find you.
Thank you,
Amazing.
Elle. I appreciate having me and talking to your listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much for being a guest.